Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 518 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So I want you to go and pick up that book on either Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, people always wonder, where do I find all of these guests? I mean, we're on episode number 518. Where do 500 people come from? And the answer is a lot of times social media. And I got to tell you, I saw our next guest, I saw her social media account, and I was like, she is going to be an absolute knockout on the podcast. And the students are absolutely going to love all the information that they're going to get. There is no question in my mind. So I'm so excited about today's interview. You have no idea. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. When it comes to health, Jill Grimes, MD, is passionate about prevention. As a proud fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians, her practical and evidence-based advice covers all ages, genders, and body parts. Dr. Grimes has always enjoyed educating in and out of the exam rooms. Her message is shared across all media platforms. We're talking about print magazines to online forums to radio talk shows and even television. Dr. Grimes was a National Merit and President Endowed Scholar at Texas A&M University, the Fightin Texas Aggie Class of '87. Whoop, whoop. She earned her medical degree from Baylor College of Medicine and completed her family medicine residency in Austin, Texas. After 20 years of private practice in Austin, Dr. Grimes then worked part-time on campus at the University of Texas University Health Services until 2020, at which point she pivoted to community outreach through public health initiatives during COVID. And as a parent of freshly graduated college students herself, Dr. Grimes is especially empathetic to the medical challenges these young people experience. But I tell you what, her passion project is an award-winning book that is now in its third edition. It is humorous, it is evidence-based, it is called The Ultimate College Student Health Handbook, your guide for everything from hangovers to homesickness. And I guarantee you it is in my kitchen right now waiting for my daughter to come home from Rice. But there's the book. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jill Grimes.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
I tell you what, I have been waiting. I had this circled on my calendar. I'm like, I got to be in tip-top shape. So here we are, ready to go. Tell our audience you chose Texas A&M for your undergraduate experience, and I hear that they are very passionate about their football team there. Why did you choose A&M?
Well, first let me say, yes, we are super passionate about football. Whoop. And if you want to see something special, go to Kyle Field for midnight yell practice, a midnight before a home game, and the whole dang stadium is filled. That's how much we like football. So it's awesome. Ironically, I actually chose A&M really because I'm the youngest child of a professor. And so I could go anywhere. I got a full scholarship. A&M was one of those places, and I was super fixated on medical school, and they had a program at that time where you could do 2 years at A&M and then go straight into medical school, which is what I thought on the front end that I wanted to do. So the message I really want to get across to college students is that I went to A&M really not excited about A&M. I was just so fixated on the future. And what happened was I ended up loving A&M so much that I finished my degree in 3 years, but stayed a fourth year. I was an RA, I lived on campus, and I stayed a fourth year just to have more time at A&M and get the whole college experience and take extra classes and do all the things. And it was amazing. So just because you go somewhere that may or may not even be your first choice, and it was my first choice, but you can go somewhere and not be excited and end up just fully immersed. And that's what I want everyone to do.
I love it. Really good advice. I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think everything happens for a reason, you know? We
Sure.
talked before a little bit about my daughter's journey getting to Rice. And you know what? I don't think she didn't even know what rice was. Like she had no clue. She's like, Rice University, what the heck is that? And I'm like, no, it's a great
It's amazing.
campus. I'm like, you got to go and see it for yourself. And when you see it with your eyes, you're going to understand why I feel that it's so great. But until you go there and experience it, you just don't know. And so she ended up getting accepted. And you know what? She's having the time of her life. As you know, it is a beautiful place on earth and just incredibly smart students. You know, she's having the time of her life. And now she feels, well, I was always destined to go there. But she never would have gone if it wasn't for me saying, hey, you know, there's this school in Houston, it's called
Right.
Rice. She didn't even know about it. Right. So if it wasn't for me, forget it. She doesn't know. So you just
There
never
you
know
go.
how these things are going to work out. I guess that's the bottom line.
Very true. Very true.
All right, so now you're a board certified family physician, and I know
Mhm.
you do some work for the University of Massachusetts Medical School as
Yes.
well. I mean, talk about, you know, what do you do over there? What's your daily life like?
So it's a funny thing. Back in the year 2000, long before Zoom, I became a clinical instructor for UMass Medical School. Yes, I live in Austin. Yes, that's in Massachusetts. But it was an innovative program back then to pull in opinions from family physicians across the country. And Dr. Frank Domino spearheaded this. And it was very interesting because we were all in private practice with different academic ties, but across the country. And we would have phone calls with group phone calls with students and share experiences and cases from across the country. And that's evolved since then. Obviously, now there are Zoom things. And frankly, right now, I'm primarily just grading papers, which is fun. I also need to say a quick disclaimer. Anything I say, I am representing myself. I'm not representing UMass Med School. I'm not representing any former employers, which does include the University of Texas.
All right. Well, you got your disclaimer in, so that's good.
You're welcome,
Now,
Lloyd.
you know, a lot of our college students, they're all on TikTok, and I absolutely love your TikTok account. Go and fo follow Dr. Jill Grimes on there. I tell you, it is a good time. You have great content. It's also very current, which I love because it's what's actually happening on college campuses today. And you know what?
Yes.
When I speak to adults about Borgs, they're like, what? I mean, they have no clue what's going on, but every college student knows what a Borg is. Can you talk about Borgs? What are they and why are they dangerous?
Sure. So, for anyone who has not heard of a Borg, let me just say that Borg, BORG, stands for Blackout Rage Gallon. Now, that being said, obviously, I'm black drinking to blackout, and which we'll talk about in a minute, is bad. That's a poor choice. So, a blackout rage gallon, if you are doing it for the purpose of blacking out, yeah, that's a poor choice also. They're dangerous because when they came out, which is about 3 years ago now, that they were first sort of trendy.
Mm,
There were TikTok recipes that people were talking about putting an entire fifth of vodka into. So what you do is you take an empty, like a gallon container of water, milk, whatever, you empty that out. You
mm,
pour in alcohol, then you put in some electrolyte solution like Gatorade, whatever,
mm.
and fill the rest up, with water, and then you've got your drink, and then you put a clever name on it. They have a lot of really, honestly, pretty darn funny names. But what the things that I like about Borgs, the idea is that you take this with you for your darty, for your all day party, right?
Mhm.
So tailgating, darties, whatever. But the idea is that this is what you're going to drink. You're not going to drink anything from anybody else. Reduces your risk of anybody spiking your drink, which is
Mhm.
great. And sober you, most importantly, sober you gets to decide how much alcohol do I even want to consider putting in my body today, even if you're not planning on drinking the whole thing. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people, especially freshmen, tends to be underclassmen who are understandably feeling peer pressured. And this is an easy thing for them to drink less. Nobody knows how much is in your Borg except for you. You make it. So I am actually not entirely opposed to these. I think in a way it's a good idea up front. It's a bad idea if you're, putting in copious amounts of alcohol. A fifth of vodka is 17 shots of vodka. That can kill you. That's just dumb. So I that's what a Borg is, and that's my thoughts about it.
Yeah, I like the way that you think about it, that really nobody knows how much alcohol you're putting in
Right.
there. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? I mean, if you have a fifth of alcohol in there, that could be a
Yes.
bad thing
Sure.
because we shouldn't be drinking a fifth of alcohol. But if you don't want to drink that much, you could put very little or none at all, and really nobody's going to know the difference. And I agree with you, the Borg names are incredibly creative. I mean, I've seen whole
Yeah.
Reddits about,
Yes.
about naming a Borg, and they're very, very creative. So I do like that. And you know what? And you mentioned the spiking part. I mean, when I was in college, I mean, I'm sure you've seen stuff like this too. I mean, they served jungle juice and it was literally
Yep.
in a garbage can. It was in a plastic
Yep. That's
garbage
why we
can.
called it trash can punch. It
Yeah,
was in a trash can.
it was literally a trash can, and they were mixing all kinds
Yeah.
of things in there. Who the heck knows what they were putting in there? And I'll never forget. I went to a party, and this one guy that I knew, I saw him drinking, and he was holding, of course, a red Solo cup, and
Right.
his whole arm was red. I'm like, what is that? This
You
guy
start.
used his arm to mix this jungle juice in the garbage can, and his
Yep.
hands were still stained with the red dye from the jungle juice. Okay.
I've seen that. I can testify that's a real thing.
I mean, that was a real thing. So, like,
Yeah.
I like when we're talking about boards that you make it yourself. It can't possibly be spiked with anything bad, only the stuff that you're putting in it. So, there is a little bit more control that way. So, I
Right.
thank you for educating me and our audience too about, well, I mean, if you're drinking a fifth of alcohol, that's bad, but there could be some good components
Right.
of this trend that we're talking about.
Right.
And you mentioned blacking out, right?
Yes.
Board really standing out for a blackout rage gallon. What happens in your brain when you black out from drinking?
So, first, let me clarify that blacking out is not passing out. Passing out is being unconscious. And so sometimes those words are used interchangeably.
Mhm.
But blackout drinking really is referring to when you have a memory gap the next day. And so what happens is if you drink typically just this, it almost always comes from shots because it's from your blood alcohol levels raising too high, too fast, and it literally sort of switches off your hippocampus, which is what takes your short-term memories and stores them as long-term memories. So you literally the next day, you don't have long-term memories. So you have a blackout gap in your memory. And a lot of times it might be patchy. Some people call that browning out or graying out when it's patchy memory loss, but that's what blackout really means. And the thing is, people will say, well, how bad is it if you've blacked out? Well, I think it's best to think of it like a concussion. We know that one or two concussions are not good for your brain. We know that blacking out is not good for your brain. We know that in the immediate aftermath of being blackout drunk, right? Your brain is sluggish. You're not going to learn or retain new information very well. It's going to be very hard to study in that situation. So think of it like bruising your brain. There's not structural damage. And we don't know what the long-term implications are of if you are being blackout drunk every single weekend or multiple times in a week. I'm pretty sure it's bad for your brain, but I can't say exactly, is that going to cause dementia at an early age? What exactly it's going to do? I don't know, but it's not smart to do. And there's so many implications that are overlaying with this, legal not being the least of it, with consent. Think about if you were intimate with somebody and you have a blackout memory gap the next day of that time when you were intimate with somebody. Maybe it was you, maybe you have the blackout memory gap, maybe they do. But the problem is, even if it appeared they were giving ongoing, enthusiastic, verbalized consent, if they have no memory of it, they have no memory of that. And so now you're getting into who said what. And of course, the truth is, let me just be absolutely clear, when people are drinking, when they are drunk, they cannot give consent. And yes, that's when most physical intimacy happens. But just from a legal aspect, I think it's really important to be clear about that.
Yeah, thank you for being so clear about that. I think that's super important what you're talking about. There's no question about it. And that's why I advocate if you or the other person that you're about to be intimate with has been drinking at all, just exchange phone numbers and go out to brunch with them the next day. I mean, if you decide at brunch that this is still going to happen, and believe me, it will if it was intended to be,
Right, right.
then, then go for it. But just make sure that you're making that decision sober because you might get to brunch the next day and go, what the heck was I thinking last night? I mean, right? I mean,
Right.
listen, if you're blackout, then you really don't know what's going on. And unfortunately, I hear all too often within fraternities and sororities that the goal is to black
Yes.
out tonight. And I think that is the fundamental difference between when you and I were in college versus what I'm seeing today. When you and I
Right.
were in college, it was more of a marathon. It was more of, yes, we're going to drink alcohol, but we're going to do it over an extended period of time. So maybe we're only having one drink an hour, and we know that our body is getting rid of, a drink or more per hour just
Right.
naturally. So
Right.
that was kind of the safe way to use alcohol responsibly, and it was an all-day thing. And we were just enjoying our time together. So we had, all of like we were playing darts and foosball and all of these games to enjoy each other's time, but it was an all-day thing. Today, what I see is, okay, we need to drink as fast as quickly as possible
Right.
so we can get messed up instantly, like within
Back,
like 5 seconds.
blackout or back out.
Right. So like
That
this is
which
the fundamental
is
shift that I've seen.
that, yes. And that honestly, and that's what scares me because that's, there's just so many bad outcomes. And
Mhm.
it has been very interesting to me how many young adults will say, well, if I don't remember, it doesn't matter what happened. And I'm like, yeah, unless you're pregnant or hurt someone or got hurt yourself or got an STD or got in a wreck or got arrested. I mean, like there's the list just goes on and on. Yes, it does matter even if you don't remember it.
Yeah.
Forget any other issues outside of that. But there are a lot of ramifications and there's just no need to do that. And it typically comes from a place of insecurity. And I've had many college students tell me that they either, the whole concept of pre-gaming, whether it's with pills or with edibles or with alcohol, they're pre-gaming because they're so nervous and insecure about how to interact with that person that they like. And this gives them that quote ounce of courage, except that it's taking it way too far. And imagine waking up with someone else and not knowing what happened. That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary. And that's not fun and it's not cool.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's really important for our audience to hear. I was on the job as the executive director of Sigma Pi for a week, and I was notified about a tragic situation that happened over at Chico, California, Cal State Chico, where one of our members was turning 21 while he was pledging the fraternity. He went out to a bar, okay, and had a
Mhm.
licensed bartender serve him
And it's
21
been the 21 shots.
21 shots on his 21st birthday at the bar. Okay, so you have a licensed bartender giving him, and not only that, they actually brought around a garbage can so that way he could get sick
Yes,
at the bar and
right.
not leave his chair at the bar. And I'm like, what is going on? And he died that night. And so I guess, the
Tragic.
the reason why I mention all of that is that I feel like if the brothers of the fraternity who were there and the sorority members who were at the bar as well that night, if they just knew the warning signs of alcohol poisoning, then maybe they could have acted and saved his life. So tell our audience, what are the warning signs of alcohol poisoning?
So obviously someone being unconscious, but the number one question I get asked is, how do I know if they're just drunk and sleeping or are
Mhm,
they unconscious?
mhm.
Here's the thing, people. If you cannot wake them up, like you shake their shoulders, Emma, wake up, talk to me. If Emma cannot wake up and talk to you and have a coherent conversation for at least 2 minutes, she's unconscious. And that person needs help because what's happening is you when your blood alcohol levels rise, you start losing reflexes. One of the reflexes that you lose is your gag reflex. And so one of the things is if you're throwing up and you don't have a gag reflex, this is gross, but you basically can choke on it.
Mhm.
And if you take a sip of water and you get a tiny bit that just goes down the wrong pipe, right? And you cough so forcibly to get it out, everyone's had that experience. That doesn't happen when that reflex is gone, so you can't clear it. A warning sign is throwing up. If if you're to the point of throwing up, you've definitely had too much, and the thought that you can throw up and quote get it out of your system, no, the alcohol's been absorbed into your bloodstream. You may be throwing up food or liquid, but you are not throwing up the alcohol. It's already been absorbed. So throwing up repeatedly, that is a sign. Obviously, severe slurred speech, losing balance. Seizures, if someone has a seizure, that is, it seems very obvious, but it's amazing how when people will come to from that, and because they're awake and able to talk after a bit, they'll be like, "Oh, no, don't call an ambulance because I don't want my parents to know. I don't want to get kicked out of school. There's all these things," and students will just kind of go on through the rest of the night. So those things you really need to watch out for. And the other thing to know is that alcohol can also kill you, not just by throwing up and being unconscious, but it can suppress your drive to breathe. And so literally you just breathe slower and slower until you're not getting enough oxygen. Or it can cause an arrhythmia in your heart, a funny rhythm in your heart that then basically stops your heart. So these things, the trend, I have not seen as much of that marking, all the shots for your birthday. I haven't seen that as much in the past year, thank goodness, because of horrible tragedies like what you saw. And we need to keep talking about that though, so it doesn't happen again.
Right.
But there is still this general perception of doing 5 or 6 shots in 30 minutes is just not a big deal, or that's just part of the pregame. And that shows that you've got alcohol tolerance, which is not good. It means that you just are no longer getting warning signals that you're having too much alcohol before you get to the seizure or repressed reflexes or heart arrhythmias.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing that as well. And one of the reasons why I love your book is you literally talk about hangovers right on the front cover, your guide for everything from hangovers to homesickness, which I think is just brilliant. So kudos to you on the title.
Thank
Now,
you.
if I'm having a massive hangover after drinking the night before, tell our audience, what is the best way to feel better quickly?
Okay, well, there's no immediate fix, despite all the TikToks that say if you shove your face in ice water. Honestly, there's something called the dive reflex, and that may give you some small amount of improvement, but it's transient. And frankly, I do not recommend that because you're more likely to, like gasp and aspirate the water, and now you've got that on top of everything else. So please don't do that. But what you want to do is you want to get an electrolyte replacement powder, or liquid that you put in your bottle of water.
Mhm.
You do not want to use a straw. A straw will introduce more air into your stomach. If you're nauseous at all, it's going to make you more nauseous and make you throw up again. So you want to use an electrolyte rehydration solution, which is Pedialyte. Cure is a name brand. I'm actually, disclaimer, I am on their board. I don't make money from that, but I like their product.
Mhm.
But those are the only 2 licensed oral rehydration products. And you sip on that, you should be able to go through a normal bottle of water in about an hour. And you just want to steadily be sipping on that and keep rehydrating. When you can keep that down, you're likely to have a bit of low blood sugar. And so you can, start with a little bit of crackers or toast. But you just want to start low, go slow. Do not jump into the garbage burrito, which, people think about like hangover food with the super greasy. Honestly, for more people than it helps, it hurts and makes them more nauseous. So you want to replenish your dehydration. You want to fix your electrolytes that got out of whack. And you want to, just be slow and steady. Also, really key, please do not take your ADHD stimulant medications when you have a hangover. It will actually, people do that because sometimes it does actually help the headache a bit, but it actually aggravates the rest of the symptoms. And so that does nothing to help your inflammation. It does nothing, all the achiness that you feel when you're hungover and the brain fog. It's better not to be speeding up your heart rate. So limit your caffeine. If you have coffee every single day, you don't want to skip the coffee completely because you'll get a caffeine withdrawal headache on top of that. But really limit the caffeine, limit the things that speed up your heart rate.
Very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, the other thing too is, I talk about alcohol and drug abuse prevention on college campuses, and marijuana is always this really tricky subject, especially because so many states in the country have legalized pot. But the universities and the fraternities and sororities are still very clear that they don't want any pot at all in these chapter houses. So, what is your stance on college students using pot?
Okay, so here's the thing. Weed is everywhere, edibles and weed. And it's in the fraternities and sororities, it's in the dorms, it's in the apartments, it's everywhere, whether it's legal or not. We know that for brains younger than 25, it's particularly not good. And that would encompass pretty much everybody in college and fraternities and sororities. I think that it's important to talk about why people are using these substances. A lot of people are using edibles or vaping weed because it's calorie free and they want the buzz, the same reasons that people are reaching for alcohol. They want to calm their nerves. They want to get that ounce of courage. And I think it's very easy to become dependent on that. And in fact, today's weed is truly addictive. So 1 in 6 teens will get addictive and 1 in 11 adults. So over the age of 18 will get addictive. Now that means that if you're looking at your friend group, yeah, 10 out of 11 won't get addicted. It doesn't mean they won't ever have a problem from it, but it does mean they won't get addicted. But I think, if I could wave a wand and erase it until people are 25 at least, I would do that in a heartbeat. But I don't know that that's productive. I think it's more important to address the things that we see happening from it. Every campus physician and every campus psychiatrist, for sure, does not like it because we see the bad outcomes. Obviously, the self-selected bad outcomes, that's who comes in the door, right? So everything I see about it is pretty much bad.
Mhm.
And I've seen it really, it short term, like alcohol, in the immediate after usage, it calms people, except for when it doesn't, because weed, unlike alcohol, has this weird thing that every once in a while, randomly, it makes you horrible. You have a bad trip or whatever. And there's,
Mhm.
even if it's from the same plant and everything. But in general, it makes people feel better in the short term. But what we do know is in the long term, it makes anxiety worse. It makes depression worse. It is not good for studying. It's not good for retaining new information. It's not good for learning. So that's my stance on it. I try and talk about it. I try and talk about the things that we see and the problems that are there. But I also need to acknowledge that young people are seeing their peers use it, and they are not even if there are bad outcomes going on, they are not seeing it. And so I think to just say it's horrible across the board, that doesn't advance the conversation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's a pretty good stance, and you're right. It's not good for anxiety long term. So I don't think people that really look at it from that perspective long term, it's problematic. And I agree with you too. If we could just wave a wand and then just say nobody use it until you're 25, I mean, that's when your brain is fully formed. Since a lot of the people in these fraternities and sororities are using it at 18 years old, 19 years old,
Yeah.
20 years old, your brain is still forming. And so
Right.
that cross intersection there of using the marijuana while your brain is forming, that is the issue. That is the issue right there. And if we could, put it off until age 25, I think we would be in a much better place with it. But we can't. We've learned prohibition doesn't work, right? I mean,
Right.
we've tried that out in this country, and it didn't really work out so well for us.
Yeah.
So so like we're really stuck in that bad spot. And then the students are like, well, it's legal. So if it's legal, then why is it so bad for me? This is what I run into
Right.
all the time. And
Well, even the legal ones, I mean, p parents will say, well, should I go to another state and buy it where it's legal and get it for my kids so at least they're getting the better stuff. Um, it is definitely less risk getting it from a legal head shop than getting it on the street. If you didn't grow it, you don't know what's in it. And there's additives put in it. There's so many variables here. And it's dangerous. And again, I am biased. I see the bad outcomes, and if you, especially for anyone listening, if you have a family history of schizophrenia or of like bipolar disorder with psychotic features, um, these things, they're especially with heavy use, which again is not everybody, but for those who get addicted, it is. But for young males in particular with heavy use, there is a link with turning on sort of that schizophrenia gene earlier than you would otherwise, and you don't want that.
Yeah. I think you also hit on another really important point, which is to say that if you're getting it, whether it be pills or marijuana from your Snapchat friend,
Oh no.
let me just tell you that, I mean, the chances of it having, being laced with fentanyl, I will tell you is going to be pretty high. Okay. There's
Yeah.
probably going to be something that's added in there because you didn't grow it. You have no idea what's in it. And therefore, police are, confiscating this stuff and then doing tests and realizing there's fentanyl in there.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's cheap and it gets you really high, but it also can kill you. So there's
Yeah.
that, right?
There's that.
There's
Yeah,
that.
especially with pills. Those pills that you think are Xanax or Adderall,
Right.
very often we're finding fentanyl in them, and that's terrifying.
That's terrifying. That is, and we've seen that time and time again where families basically say, no, my son was not a drug user. He was just, using some pill in order to stay up and take his exam. And then there we go. And it was laced with fentanyl and they didn't really know it. So that is the issue.
Yes.
All right. Well, all of that I think is really helpful. And you talked a little bit about anxiety, and certainly anxiety, depression, very common among college
Mm.
students today, very widespread. What are the warning signs that I have a problem with one of my fraternity brothers or sorority sisters living in the house in terms of mental health? And what do I do as their brother or sister to fix this?
Right. Well, number one is to understand that it shouldn't stop with you. There is this need to be the one to be able, there's always one in every friend group, right? The mom, even if it's
Mhm.
guy, we a lot of times a joke, could still call him the mom,
Still mom.
because that's, we all know who I'm talking about. It's that one that always is responsible, that gets the Uber or actually drives. Nowadays, it's more that they're the one that gets the Uber and tries to be responsible and keep the herd together and all of that.
Mhm.
And there's a feeling when you're that person, especially, that you want to just do all the help yourself for that friend who is depressed, and you're listening to them and all of that. But number one, you are not equipped to fully help. So the best thing you can do is to get them help at the next level, whatever that is. And your campus health is going to be the first place to start. Most campuses have helplines that you can call. You can call for you and just say, this is what I see going on, and what can I do to help? And maybe walk them over to the health center. That helps. What signs you should look for that people often don't realize is basically isolation and poor hygiene. So when someone just isn't getting out of bed, every time you try and go in there, their room is dark, they're in bed, they've got the sheet over their head or their mask on, they're not getting up, they're not even brushing their teeth, they're not showering. Those are very worrisome signs, and you need to get help. Obviously, if they're telling you they're super sad, they're super stressed out, they want to hurt themselves, they don't, it's, life isn't worth living. I mean, those signs are not subtle. But I think the things people miss are the just social isolation. And nowadays, with being able to go to class online, just you like, oh, I haven't seen them out. They're not coming out of
Mhm.
the room. Well, and they'll tell you, I'm just, just going, phoning it in, watching class online. So those are the things I think you really need to watch out for.
Great advice. And there is mental health first aid out there, certification. That could be a really good thing too, I think, for a lot of these college fraternities and sororities to get as a group, because it will really train you to be able to ask those difficult questions to basically
Right.
say, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? And being able to verbalize that as a college student can be really difficult. But I think that can really get at, do we have a problem here that we need to really get involved with? And we do have counseling centers on all of these college campuses. You're paying for it, whether you want to or not. It's coming out of your tuition. So,
I say
like,
this all the time, and it's
yeah,
part of your tuition. Use your benefits.
use your
Some
benefits. Yeah,
some
absolutely.
campuses have really great mental health services, really
100%.
great.
100%.
Others don't. And then there's also, a national, in the United States for American citizens, there is the National Helpline, 988.
Yeah.
988.
988, use that. But also, if you're a brother or sister and you're worried about somebody in your organization, bring them, take them over there. Just walk them
Yeah,
over there to the counseling center. Just
yes,
having somebody to walk with and to be able to go
that's
there, I mean, that
huge.
is huge. Can't
That is that is the single most helpful thing you can do.
100%. I totally agree. Now, this has been really great. So I appreciate you sharing all this information because it's just getting the information out and you're literally saving lives with your words. So that's really important. I do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie podcast. And so you can imagine I like to eat really well. I like to go to good restaurants and all over the map. I mean, I've been to dive places that have incredible foods, and then I've also been to some fine dining places, and they're all good. So the next time that I happen to be speaking in Austin, Texas, I need you to tell me where should I be going for a great meal?
Okay, well, for a foodie meal, I would go to Jack Allen's, which is a fabulous farm to table, super fresh, seasonal foods. They always have a very creative menu. My favorite thing, I'm gluten free,
Mhm.
but they can make almost anything gluten free. But they have a red ruby trout salad that I think is just amazing, amazing. But if you're coming to Austin, you got to go get tacos and you got to get Tex-Mex and there's a million restaurants here. Matt's El Rancho is a favorite for kind of traditional ones, really great margaritas too, I will add. And Fonda San Miguel is if you want more interior Mexico food, more foodie-ish.
Well, you had me
Sorry, I
at
can't narrow
tacos.
it down. I like food.
Yeah, we both like food, so we share that, which is great. And you had me at tacos and margaritas. So, I mean, come on. I mean, there's nothing bad that can happen here. That's really good stuff. So,
Uh,
I appreciate all of those recommendations. Really good stuff. So, if our college students, if they want to book you to speak on their college campus, if they want to go and buy your book, it's called The Ultimate College Student Health Handbook, your guide for everything from hangovers to homesickness. Where should they go to connect with you and get all the stuff?
You can go to my website, which is jillgrimesmd.com. You can find me on TikTok. I'm the TikTok college doc. That's easy to remember, right? It's TikTok.collegedoc. On Instagram, Jill Grimes MD. And yeah, reach out to me.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Grimes, for sharing all of that. Go and check out her website, jillgrimesmd.com. And you can also check her out on Instagram, Jill Grimes MD. So we appreciate you spending all of this time here with us today. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you reaching out.
Of course. And to our audience, if you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Grimes, I want you to like it and I want you to share it with members of your fraternity or sorority that need to hear her words. And I know you know who we're talking about right now. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.
Bye.